The airport buzzed with noise, people rushing, announcements blaring, and luggage wheels rolling. A young boy, no older than 12, stood nervously at the check-in counter, gripping his ticket tightly. His father had promised this trip would be special, but right now, all he felt was anxiety. A flight attendant behind the counter eyed him with impatience. "Next," she snapped, barely glancing at him. The boy stepped forward, handing over his ticket with a quiet, "Here you go." The attendant snatched it, her lips pursed. Without a word, she scanned it, then frowned. "This ticket is invalid," she declared, her voice sharp. The boy's heart dropped. "But, my dad gave it to me," he said. She didn't let him finish. With a quick, dismissive motion, she tore the ticket in half and dropped the pieces on the counter. "No ticket, no flight. Next." The boy stared at the torn pieces, his throat tight. He had never felt so small. Behind him, passengers shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. Just as he was about to turn away, defeated, a deep voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here?" The boy turned, and there stood his father, tall and calm, but his eyes were like ice. The flight attendant barely looked up. This child had a fake ticket. "He's been dealt with." The man's expression didn't change. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card, sliding it across the counter. The attendant picked it up, then froze. Her face drained of color. The card read, "CEO, Skyline Airways." The boy's father didn't raise his voice. "That fake ticket was first class. And that child is my son." Silence fell. The attendant's hands trembled. She had just torn up the ticket of the airline owner's son, and now, she had to face the consequences. The airport noise seemed to fade as the flight attendant stared at the CEO's card, her mind racing. She had made a terrible mistake, one that could cost her job. The boy's father didn't yell. Instead, he turned to his son, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" he asked softly. The boy nodded, though his eyes were still wide with shock. He had never seen his father like this, calm, but with an authority that made even the air feel heavier. The attendant finally found her voice. "Sir, I didn't know. There must have been a system error." The CEO cut her off. "The only error here was your attitude." His tone was firm but controlled. "My son had a valid ticket. You didn't check properly. And instead of helping, you humiliated him." Passengers nearby had stopped to watch, whispers spreading. A few pulled out phones, recording the scene. The attendant's face burned with shame. The CEO turned to another staff member. "Get my son a new ticket. And call the manager, now." The attendant's stomach twisted. This wasn't just a scolding. Her job was on the line. But the boy, still shaken, tugged his father's sleeve. "Dad, it's okay. Maybe she didn't mean it." His father looked down at him, his expression softening slightly. Even after being treated poorly, his son was still thinking of others. The CEO took a deep breath. Maybe there was more to this situation than he first thought. The moment the flight attendant saw the CEO's identification card, the bustling airport noises around her seemed to fade into a muffled hum. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held the small, embossed card that bore the Skyline Airways logo and the words, "Chief Executive Officer," in bold letters. Her stomach twisted into a knot. She had just torn up the ticket of the airline owner's son. The boy, still standing at the counter, looked up at his father with wide eyes. He had never seen his dad use his position like this before. At home, his father was just Dad, the man who helped him with homework, who laughed at silly jokes, who made sure he ate his vegetables. But here, in this airport, he was different. He stood taller, his voice carried authority, and even the way he held himself made people stop and listen. The flight attendant's mouth went dry. She had dealt with hundreds, maybe thousands, of passengers before, and she had always prided herself on being efficient. But efficiency had turned into impatience, and impatience had turned into rudeness. She had assumed the boy was just another unsupervised kid trying to sneak onto a flight. She hadn't even bothered to double-check the ticket before tearing it. Now, she was facing the consequences. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The passengers nearby had stopped moving, their eyes flickering between the CEO, the boy, and the flight attendant. A few had their phones out, discreetly recording. The tension was so thick it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Then, the CEO spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence like a blade. The only error here was your attitude. The words landed like a hammer. The attendant opened her mouth to apologize, to explain, to say anything, but nothing came out. The CEO continued, his tone controlled but firm. My son had a valid ticket. You didn't check properly. And instead of helping, you humiliated him. Each sentence felt like another weight pressing down on her. She had been so sure of herself just moments ago. Now, she realized how wrong she had been. The boy, still clutching the torn pieces of his ticket, looked between his father and the flight attendant. He had been embarrassed, yes, but seeing the woman's face turn pale, hearing the tremor in her voice, he felt something else. Pity. He tugged gently on his father's sleeve. Dad, it's okay. Maybe she didn't mean it. His father glanced down at him, his expression softening just a fraction. Even after being treated poorly, his son was still thinking of others. The CEO exhaled slowly, his anger cooling slightly. He had expected his son to be upset, maybe even tearful. Instead, the boy was trying to defend the woman who had just embarrassed him. Before the CEO could respond, hurried footsteps approached. The airline's manager, a middle-aged man with a nervous expression, rushed over. He had been called the moment the CEO's presence was confirmed. Sir. I wasn't informed you were traveling today, the manager stammered. The CEO didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to another staff member nearby. Get my son a new ticket. First class. The employee nodded quickly and rushed off. Then, the CEO looked at the manager. We need to talk. Privately. The flight attendant's heart pounded. This was it. She was going to be fired, right here, in front of everyone. As the CEO and manager stepped aside to speak, the flight attendant stood frozen, her mind racing. She had worked for Skyline Airways for 5 years. She had always been strict, yes, but never like this. What had gone wrong today? Then it hit her. Earlier that morning, she had received a call from her sister. Their mother, who had been sick for months, had taken a turn for the worse. The doctors weren't sure she would make it through the week. The flight attendant had been given the option to take leave, but she had refused. She needed the money. Medical bills were piling up, and she couldn't afford to miss work. So she had come in, pretending everything was fine. But inside, she was breaking. And instead of dealing with her pain, she had taken it out on a child. The CEO and manager returned. The manager looked at the flight attendant, his expression unreadable. Sir has decided not to terminate your employment, the manager said. The flight attendant blinked in shock. I don't understand. The CEO studied her for a long moment. Then he said, my son believes you didn't mean it. And I've learned to trust his judgment. He paused. But here's what's going to happen. You're being suspended for 1 week, without pay. Use that time to think about how you treat people. When you return, you'll undergo retraining. And if I ever hear of you treating a passenger like this again, you will be fired. The flight attendant nodded quickly, her throat tight. Thank you, sir. I won't let it happen again. As the CEO and his son walked away, the boy glanced back at the flight attendant. He gave her a small, hesitant smile, not angry, not gloating, just kind. That smile stayed with her long after they were gone. The flight attendant sat in her small apartment, staring blankly at the television without really seeing what was on. The sound was turned down low, just background noise to fill the silence. Her suspension had only just begun, but already the weight of what happened at the airport pressed heavily on her shoulders. She replayed the scene in her mind over and over, the way she had snapped at the boy, the look on his face when she tore his ticket, the moment she realized just how badly she had messed up. She reached for her phone, thumb hovering over her sister's contact. She wanted to call, to explain why she had been so on edge lately, but something stopped her. Pride, maybe. Or shame. Instead, she put the phone down and walked to the kitchen, opening the fridge only to close it again when nothing inside appealed to her. Meanwhile, high above the clouds, the boy and his father settled into their first-class seats. The boy kept glancing at his dad, as if waiting for him to say something about what happened. His father noticed the looks and finally turned to him. "You're quiet," he observed. The boy shrugged, playing with the edge of his seatbelt. "I just feel bad for her." His father raised an eyebrow. "After how she treated you?" The boy nodded. "Yeah. I mean, she was really mean, but she looked scared when she found out who you were." "Really scared?" His father leaned back, considering this. He had expected his son to be angry, or at least relieved that the situation had been resolved in their favor. But the boy's empathy surprised him. "You think I was too hard on her?" The boy hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe she was having a bad day." Back on the ground, the flight attendant was indeed having a bad day, one in a string of many. She sat at her small kitchen table, a cup of coffee going cold in front of her. Without work to distract her, her thoughts kept circling back to her mother's declining health, the mounting medical bills, and now this suspension. She had always prided herself on being strong, on handling whatever life threw at her without complaint. But right now, she felt anything but strong. Her phone buzzed. A message from her supervisor: "We need to talk about your return next week. Call me." Her stomach twisted. Was this it? Were they going to fire her after all? She considered ignoring it, but knew she couldn't. With a deep breath, she picked up the phone and dialed. To her surprise, her supervisor's tone was neutral, not angry. "We've had a request from corporate," she said. "You're to report to the training center Monday morning. They're assigning you to a special program." The flight attendant frowned. "What kind of program?" "Customer service re-education," her supervisor said. "Look, between you and me, you got off easy. The CEO could have fired you on the spot. Take this seriously." She hung up, leaving the flight attendant with a mix of relief and dread. She still had a job, but the thought of sitting through training sessions, being treated like some new hire who didn't know better, made her cheeks burn with humiliation. At that moment, her sister called. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her voice gentle. The flight attendant opened her mouth to say she was fine, but what came out instead was, "I screwed up, really bad." And then, to her own shock, she started to cry. On the plane, the boy had finally dozed off, his head leaning against the window. His father watched him for a moment, then pulled out his laptop. He typed a quick email to his HR director: "Make sure the training program for that attendant includes mentorship, not just lectures. And have someone check in on her, personally. Let's see if there's more to this." He wasn't sure why he was doing this. Maybe it was his son's words getting to him. Maybe it was the look in the attendant's eyes when she realized her mistake, not just fear, but something deeper. Either way, He knew that how he handled this would say as much about him as it did about her. As the plane cruised through the night sky, two very different people, miles apart, were each grappling with the same question: what kind of person did they want to be? The flight attendant sat in the sterile training room, her fingers tapping nervously against the desk. The walls were bare except for a Skyline Airways logo and a motivational poster about excellence in service that suddenly felt like it was mocking her. She had arrived early, determined to make a good impression, but now that she was here, the reality of the situation settled over her like a heavy blanket. Across from her sat a woman in her late 40s with warm brown eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. This was Maria, the senior trainer assigned to her case. Maria slid a folder across the table. "Before we begin," she said, "I want you to know something. This isn't just about correcting a mistake. It's about understanding why it happened." The flight attendant swallowed hard. She had prepared herself for lectures, for stern warnings, maybe even public shaming in front of other employees. But Maria's tone wasn't accusatory, it was curious. Almost kind. "Why do you think you reacted the way you did?" Maria asked. The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that, not her supervisor, not the CEO, not even herself. She opened her mouth to give the expected answer: "I was stressed, I wasn't paying attention," but something stopped her. The memory of the boy's face flashed in her mind. The way he had looked at her, not with anger, but with something like pity. "I think," she said slowly, "I was angry at everything else in my life, and I took it out on him." Maria nodded, as if she had expected this. "And what's everything else?" For the first time in years, the flight attendant found herself talking, really talking, about her mother's illness, the bills piling up, the sleepless nights spent worrying. To her surprise, Maria didn't interrupt or offer empty platitudes. She just listened. Meanwhile, the CEO and his son had landed at their destination, a coastal city where the CEO was scheduled to speak at an aviation conference. As they checked into their hotel, the boy turned to his father. "Did you fire her?" he asked abruptly. His father hesitated. "No. But she's in training. And I asked someone to look into her situation." The boy nodded, satisfied. "Good." His father raised an eyebrow. "You really care what happens to her, don't you?" The boy shrugged. "I just think people deserve second chances." Back at the training center, Maria closed her notebook. "Here's what we're going to do," she said. "You're going to shadow me on flights for the next week. Not as a punishment, but as a reminder of why we do this job. It's not just about tickets and seat assignments. It's about people." The flight attendant felt something she hadn't in a long time: hope. That evening, as she walked to her car, her phone buzzed. A message from HR: "Your health insurance has been temporarily extended to cover your mother's treatments. This is not standard policy, but an exception has been made." She stared at the screen, stunned. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't even told HR about her mother's condition. There was only one person who could have authorized this. The next morning, she arrived at the training center early again. This time, she brought coffee, 2 cups. She handed one to Maria. "Thank you," she said quietly. Maria took the coffee and smiled. "Don't thank me yet. Today, you're working economy class." For the first time in weeks, the flight attendant laughed. The flight attendant tightened the straps of her apron as she prepared for her first day back in the air, not as a seasoned professional, but as a trainee under Maria's watchful eye. The economy cabin bustled with passengers stowing luggage, arguing over overhead bin space, and settling restless children into seats. She inhaled deeply, catching the familiar sense of coffee and jet fuel. This was where she belonged, yet today she felt like a stranger in her own workplace. Maria nudged her elbow. "First rule of economy," she murmured, "smile before they do." sets the tone. The flight attendant forced her lips upward as a frazzled mother approached, dragging a toddler in one hand and balancing a diaper bag in the other. Seat 22B, the woman sighed, thrusting a crumpled boarding pass at her. Last week, she might have snapped about proper document handling. Today, she smoothed the paper carefully. Right this way, I'll help you with your bag. As she lifted the oversized carry-on, the toddler suddenly gripped her uniform skirt. You pwitty, the little girl declared. Something in her chest loosened. She crouched down. Thank you. That bow in your hair is very pretty too. The mother's shoulders visibly relaxed. 3 rows back, a teenager blasted music from his headphones. The passenger beside him glared. The flight attendant's old instincts said to reprimand him. Instead, she tapped his tray table. Those look like premium headphones, she lied. Mind keeping the volume down so others can enjoy the quiet? The teen blinked, then sheepishly lowered the volume. Maria observed from the galley, stirring cream into her coffee. Not bad, she said when the flight attendant returned. But you're still thinking in transactions, solve problem, move on. Try seeing them. What do you mean? Maria pointed to an elderly man struggling with his seatbelt. That's Mr. Ruiz. Flies this route monthly to visit his grandkids. His hands shake, Parkinson's. She nodded toward a woman reviewing a spreadsheet. Ms. Carter. Just got promoted. First business trip. Terrified someone will notice she's faking confidence. The flight attendant stared. How do you know all that? Because I ask. Maria handed her 2 snack boxes. Start with Mr. Ruiz. And this time, listen. Approaching the old man, she noticed what she'd missed before, a veteran's pin on his lapel, family photos peeking from his wallet. Sir, may I help with that? His gnarled hands stilled. Don't mean to trouble you. No trouble at all. As she fastened his belt, he patted her wrist. You remind me of my granddaughter. She's a nurse in Chicago. Is that where you're visiting? His eyes crinkled. Every month since her wife had the baby. Never thought I'd live to see the day. His voice thickened. She found herself sitting in the empty seat beside him. Tell me about them. At the hotel, the CEO scrolled through an email update from HR while his son splashed in the suite's bathtub. The report noted the flight attendant's progress, her mother's medical coverage, and, his finger paused, a handwritten note from the trainer, she's one of our best. We just had to remind her. Water sloshed as the boy popped up, grinning. Dad. The bubbles are taller than me. He set the phone aside, but not before forwarding the email to his personal account with a single added line, increase trainer bonuses by 15%. Effective immediately. Mid-flight, Maria found the flight attendant in the galley, scribbling on a napkin. What's this? Mr. Ruiz can't operate the touch screen. I'm writing down movie times for him. She hesitated. And? I was thinking. Maybe we could have laminated cards made? For passengers who need them? Maria studied her for a long moment. You're ready for first class again. The flight attendant shook her head. Not yet. But when the plane landed, she didn't head straight for the exit. Instead, she approached Mr. Ruiz. Would you like assistance to baggage claim? He beamed. If you're not too busy, dear. As she pushed his wheelchair through the terminal, she noticed something odd. Her feet ached, her back was stiff, yet she felt lighter than she had in months. At that same moment, the CEO's son tugged his father's sleeve as they boarded their return flight. Do you think she's okay now? The lady who tore my ticket? His father glanced at the gate agent, who was laughing with a passenger. I think, he said slowly, she's remembering why she loved her job. The boy nodded, satisfied, and handed his pristine ticket to the smiling gate agent. The flight attendant stood in the crew briefing room, her freshly pressed uniform smelling of starch and lavender fabric softener. Today wasn't just any return to work, it was her first shift back in first class since the incident. The other attendants exchanged glances when she entered, their conversations hushing for just a second too long before resuming. She pretended not to notice, focusing instead on straightening her name tag, the metal cool against her fingertips. Maria handed her a steaming cup of coffee. "You'll do fine," she said, reading the tension in her shoulders. "Just remember dash. See them." "I know." The flight attendant managed a shaky smile. What she didn't say was that she'd spent the night before practicing greetings in her bathroom mirror, adjusting her expressions like an actor preparing for an important role. The boarding announcement crackled through the intercom. As she took her position at the aircraft door, her palms dampened against the clipboard she held. The first passengers trickled in, tired businessmen, honeymooners still wearing their wedding bands, a famous athlete she recognized from television. She greeted each with measured professionalism, her voice never betraying the drumbeat of her heart. Then she saw them. The CEO and his son stood at the threshold of the jet bridge, sunlight haloing their figures. The boy's face lit with recognition. "You're the lady from before." Her breath caught. All her practiced words evaporated. The CEO's expression remained unreadable behind his designer sunglasses. Maria smoothly stepped forward. "Welcome aboard, gentlemen. Mr. Williams, we've upgraded you to our new premium suite as requested." But the CEO didn't move. He removed his glasses, revealing eyes that held neither anger nor forgiveness, just quiet assessment. "Actually," he said, "I believe this flight attendant owes my son something." The blood drained from her face. Was this it? Public humiliation? Termination after all? Then the boy tugged his father's sleeve. "Dad, it's okay. She looks really nervous." The CEO's stern expression softened. He reached into his breast pocket and produced, not a complaint form, but a folded piece of paper. "An apology," he said simply. "That's all we wanted." Her hands trembled as she accepted it. The paper felt heavy despite its weightlessness. I don't know what to say." "Try reading it first," the boy suggested helpfully. She unfolded the note. In careful, slightly uneven handwriting, it read. "Dear passenger. I'm sorry for my behavior on Flight 227. You deserved better. I promise to do better. Flight attendant number 3418. Her throat tightened. It was the draft apology she'd written during training, the one Maria had made her compose but never submit. How had it gotten here? The CEO answered her unspoken question. Your trainer thought you should have the chance to deliver it yourself. He extended a pen. If you still mean it. The other passengers watched curiously as she knelt to the boy's eye level. For the first time, she noticed his shoes, one lace-tied in a perfect bow, the other a tangled knot. A small, human imperfection that made him suddenly real beyond just being the CEO's son. I do mean it, she said, signing the note with a flourish before handing it to him. And I'm especially sorry to you. You were very brave that day. The boy accepted it solemnly, then surprised her by pulling something from his backpack, a slightly crushed chocolate muffin wrapped in a napkin. I brought this for you. Dad says airplane food tastes bad. A laugh bubbled up unexpectedly. That's very kind of you. She glanced at the CEO, who now wore the faintest smile. Would you like me to show you to your seats? As she led them down the aisle, the boy chattered about his school play while his father walked silently behind them. When they reached their row, the CEO paused. One more thing. He handed her a business card. My personal number. In case you ever need to reach me about anything. The card bore no title, just a name and digits in crisp black ink. It felt like both a test and an olive branch. The flight passed in a blur of perfect service, warm towels presented before requested, drink refills timed impeccably, even an impromptu origami lesson for the boy using cocktail napkins. Yet none of it felt forced anymore. When turbulence hit over the Rockies, she found herself instinctively bracing an elderly woman's arm rather than rushing to secure the beverage cart. During the meal service, the CEO caught her eye. "You're good at this," he remarked quietly. "When you let yourself be." She didn't know how to respond to that, so she simply nodded and moved on. In the galley during descent, Maria bumped her shoulder. "Well? Still think you're not ready for first class?" She looked down at the muffin still tucked in her apron pocket, slightly squished but carefully preserved. "Maybe almost ready." As passengers disembarked, the boy waved enthusiastically while his father gave a small, approving nod. She watched them disappear into the terminal, then turned to begin her post-flight checks. That's when she found the envelope tucked into a seatback. Inside was a photo of the boy holding his signed apology note, grinning widely. Scrawled on the back. "Proof of second chances. Keep this as a reminder. J.W." She traced the initials with her thumb, then carefully slipped both photo and business card into her passport case. Outside the window, ground crew scrambled beneath the belly of the aircraft. Everything looked the same as always, yet somehow completely different. The intercom crackled. "All crew, prepare for turnaround." She took a deep breath and reached for her clipboard. There was work to do. The flight attendant stood at her apartment window 6 months later, watching rain streak the glass like tiny rivers racing to the sill. Her fingers absently traced the edge of the photograph she kept on her nightstand, the one of the grinning boy holding her apology note. So much had changed since that day at the check-in counter. She turned at the sound of her phone buzzing. A text from Maria, "Don't forget, meeting with corporate today at 3. Wear the navy suit." Her stomach fluttered. The meeting wasn't just any meeting. After months of mentorship, of deliberately choosing kindness over efficiency, of learning to see passengers as people rather than problems, she had been recommended for a new role, customer experience trainer. The same woman who had once torn up a ticket in frustration was now being trusted to teach others. She smoothed the lapels of her blazer in the mirror, adjusting the delicate silver wings pinned to her collar, the ones marking her as senior staff. Her reflection looked back at her, older somehow, the lines around her eyes softer. At Skyline Airways headquarters, the elevator doors opened to reveal a sleek conference room where executives murmured over coffee. Among them sat the CEO, his fingers steepled as he reviewed a presentation tablet. He looked up when she entered, and for a brief moment, she saw something flicker in his expression, not the stern disapproval of their first encounter, but something warmer. Recognition, maybe. "You came," he said simply. She held his gaze. "I almost didn't." He nodded, as if he understood exactly what she meant, the fear of failing again, of not being enough. Then he gestured to the seat beside him. "Sit. We have a lot to discuss." The meeting passed in a blur of handshakes and proposals, but one moment stood out. When the head of operations questioned her qualifications, "Given your history with the company," the CEO didn't leap to her defense. He simply turned to her and said, "Would you like to answer that?" She could have shrunk under the scrutiny. Could have deferred to him. Instead, she took a slow breath and said, "My history is exactly why I'm qualified. I know what it's like to forget why this job matters. And I know how to help people remember." The room fell silent. Then, one by one, the executives nodded. Afterward, the CEO walked her to the elevators. "You'll start next month," he said. "The training program is yours to shape." She hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in her chest for weeks. "Why did you give me this chance?" "Really?" He considered this, watching the elevator numbers climb. Because my son was right about you, he said finally. And because second chances are rare in this world. But they shouldn't be. The elevator dinged. Before the doors opened, he added, almost as an afterthought, "Oh, and your mother? HR tells me she's responding well to treatment." Her breath caught. She hadn't realized he'd been keeping track. That evening, she sat on her couch, the contract signed and resting on the coffee table. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the city glistening under golden streetlights. She picked up her phone and typed a message, not to Maria, not to her sister, but to the number on that business card she'd been given months ago. "Thank you. For everything." 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then. "Don't thank me. Just pass it on." She smiled. And for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like something to fear, but something to step into, one small act of kindness at a time.